I'm Anna Demetriou, and I've organised this talk tonight with Bhavani Esapathi. And actually met Bhavani, God knows how many years ago, maybe 10 or more years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. And she was actually my mentor on a course I did about the future of museums and how artists could do fundraising and things like that. So with the Goethe Institute, wasn't it? It was an online talk. So she actually was my mentor. We quickly became friends as well, and I've always been constantly impressed with the high level of work that she achieves with all the difficulties that she faces in her life, which she will tell us about in this talk. But she's been a speaker at COP27. She has also been the president of the British Science Festival Science and the Arts section. Also, Camille has been that president too. She's done amazing work with lots of organisations and currently is an Institute of Advanced Studies Fellow at the University of Surrey. So the title of the talk is Transformations Through Radical Art Practice, because there's been a lot of debate with the Computer Art Society about what it means to be radical. And this Listen Scoundrels exhibition has been created, that's on the corridor down there, is to do with this idea of what it is to be radical, or what it might mean to be radical in digital art. And some people in the Computer Art Society have suggested that that we're not radical enough. So in response to that, we have Bhavani to talk about her radical arts practice. Thank you, Bhavani.
Well, thank you for that. I hope it's radical. I don't think I make or think of things hoping that they're radical, but obviously I've created this presentation trying to infer what are some radical bits that people have pointed out or that I feel, and so on. There is anyone squeamish here? Because there are some slides that have some medical imagery that may not be suitable if anyone is squeamish. I will give you a warning. So
you can look away if needed.
Yeah, so I thought a lot about it when I was asked to make this presentation about what makes every single artwork radical, but it is confusing to me coming from a literary background and not an arts background, because there are so many nuances to what radical could be. It could be going back to the root of things, which would be a more linguistic interpretation, or it could be doing something quote unquote new, if you think we can do new things. But I thought I would give you a small background as to things that actually are what most of my artwork is based on. And those are all of the things that you see, which should have been faster. It's not. Those are all the things that help me make artworks that I do. And the bit I struggle the most with would probably be trying to be a quote unquote artist. I always called myself a hesitant artist because I don't necessarily feel I make work that would sit too well in a museum or gallery or what have you. And all of those are currently and for me, I probably think those are my artistic credentials or creative credentials. So I guess we can start with the first work. This was done as part of Technology is Not Neutral, I believe, has funded a part of it. Yes. It's called Inconclusive Diagnosis. The idea of this being that when you are looking at it, it gives you the illusion of examining my body, because it is the same height as my torso. And you could see all the different scars I've collected over the years. And I spent a lot of many years trying to make invisible chronic conditions, make them more visible in nature. And an integral part of this, with this tiny screen you see at the back, was actually for anyone to ask me any kind of question they wouldn't ordinarily ask someone with multiple conditions. And can anyone think of any question here that you would probably ask that you wouldn't feel comfortable asking someone who's, or, you know, if you had to throw polite society out of this room for like 5 seconds, maybe not for the entire presentation. But if you don't, a couple of examples that I remember, which are the most striking, was you could see part of my scars was where I've had a lobectomy, which was removing of my right side of my lungs. And weirdly, most people seem to focus on that and not as much for the other scars that were there. And the questions included things like, can you have vigorous sex? Which was, I suppose you don't ask that in polite society. I mean, I would be fine for people to speak that way, but most people don't. And there was another question, I'm trying to remember it. I think they actually wanted to know if I could speak for long periods of time, which I can, but we'll come back to that probably. And when I was making this presentation, I was wondering, is this still radical in its nature? And I'm genuinely not sure anymore, mostly because I don't look like that anymore. There are a lot more exciting scars to go through. I did want to include a picture of that, but then I thought maybe keep it a bit less to all the scary imagery. So I'm really not sure if this would still be considered radical in nature. This work is was funded by Royal Wolverhampton NHS Trust, along with the Wolverhampton School of Art. The basis for this was that they wanted to showcase how South Asian societies respond to those living with IBD, Crohn's, colitis, and so on. And I thought a lot about exactly how to do it. And thankfully, at the time, I was in between surgeries. So the images you see, or if you can read them, you would see that there is a lot of things wrong with the image, I suppose, to put it in layman's terms. I had an open stoma, which is a part of my small bowel that was open and outside. So similar to the previous sculpture, this one included where on one side of it, on a plinth, you could see these elements. And the next slide is probably not for the faint-hearted. I think it's normal, but I'm told to give a warning. And the other side of the plinth, you would be able to see what are the mechanisms happening on the outside. And which was this. This was essentially me trying to eat and drink something and wait 5 minutes. And if you pay close attention, if you want to, you can see a piece of bacon that comes out of there. Well, a lot of things came out of there. Anything I ate would be coming out of there, but for this There's the bacon. The idea was to try to showcase how things look on the outside and inside. Especially in South Asian communities, there is a lot of stigma attached to having stoma bags or anything to do with what they consider to be unclean or that it's too dirty and so on, which I've actually had a fair few galleries or places who said this is too grotesque is not the word, but not compatible to be displayed, which I think if it's not compatible to be displayed to the public, that itself shows the reason why it should exist. Or at least that's what I think. And the next one is a collaboration with neurobiology department at King's College London, where it began with wanting to look at how can we make the patient-doctor relationship smoother and easier. Except the project they were currently working on at that moment had the use of psilocybin, and they were taking that and putting it into neurons and seeing how they responded to it. Except I didn't look at any of that. I was primarily interested in looking at how scientists handle cells in a lab and the amount of care and attention that's given to it. And how can we translate that into how the same scientists or the same consultants, how can we translate that care and attention that they give to the cells into when they're actually talking with patients, which you'd think is fairly straightforward, but apparently not. There were two elements to this, which was there's an artwork, an audiovisual artwork that I will show in a bit, and kind of a survey attached to it once people experience it, which was designed for, I'll play the thing. Yeah, this is essentially what we played. what the, small sample of what we did with King's College London. I hope no one is going there to get treated by scientists, is that there is a large disconnect between how much, how even empathetic they are to when they're in a lab or working with these cells, etc., to actually when they're talking to people. And this was shown at the Science Gallery by London Bridge. And I think the most interesting aspect was that the people who responded to the research were actually the doctors and their patients. So in a weird way, you could see that, oh, they were probably talking about these 2 consultants or these 3 based on the responses they gave. I don't think I'm liable. They can't sue me for this. Yeah, and that is, I've always thought about how art and science work together, especially as someone not coming from an artistic background. And for me, I think art somehow gives permission for science to take on new ways of experimenting or new ways of looking at things, etc. And one of the main reasons was when after the exhibition happened with the Insight to Care that I just showed you, is there were actual consultants who were like, yeah, I never thought about actually taking my learnings about how carefully I treat cells in a lab to people, which was, it seems the most obvious thing to think about or do, but they have other parameters they're working within, a hospital setting. But there is, I think, when you make art, it allows you to use data in novel ways that otherwise science won't allow you to. And the idea of focusing on mundane aspects, because I was brought in because they were like, oh, you can do a lot with, psilocybin or like psilocybin, etc. But I was like, oh, we can just focus on this aspect of how you handle cells. And I actually stand by this. I know that this is not credible research. There is no controlled group. There is no way to replicate it. But I do think that's exactly why you can find out new things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. I wanted to speak a little bit about Anna mentioned the MOOC I was part of, and most of the work that I do is about using technology, especially digital technologies, to actually create real social change or help move the needle a little bit. And I was grateful to have the opportunity to work with Oxfam, where they essentially realized they were losing a lot of money by working with charities and not seeing the kind of results that they would want to see for the money they put in. And they realized that that's because they have no idea what the communities of these different charities actually need, or how do you facilitate to understand what they would want. And as part of that, it began as a narrative project, which essentially got, we took in, I think there were about 9 different people from different parts of the world, Peru, US, Colombia, a few others. I think it was also in island here. And we are looking at what kind of framework can you make so you can understand the problems easier, aka spend less money on understanding the problem. And I would say we did a fairly good job, but has it been implemented? I think that is also something that I'm too scared to say on recorded video, if I'm honest. But the only, regardless of whether it's been implemented or not, the charities we worked with are still using everything we made, and it's as simple as, you know, a tiny piece of paper with 5 questions, and how can you get to the root of what bothers communities for social issues specifically. And I don't see how else one could do that without having like a digital narrative practice behind it. That brings me to looking at microplastics. So in case you haven't already noticed, I often tend to work on projects or issues that I feel that directly impact me, because I'm able to have an experiential response to it and connect with communities, people about it. And the work, it's not a finished work, it's kind of like on the way to it. We're trying to showcase how much of me would be filled with plastics in certain years, and then we just realized I'm too tiny to do that, no matter how much we reduced it. But if any all people want to volunteer, please come and talk to me. But the bit that I maybe I should talk about what actually led me to this. My favorite slide. Oh, no one. It's cats. We have cats, as do many people, and we are a raw-fed house, which is, you know, perfect when you have immunocompromised people in the house. And one of the things we realized was the cats, well, I realized and I was curious, was that the cats would not eat food from a plate when it's raw after maybe a week's time, 2 weeks' time, etc. And it was quite unusual and curious, but they would eat it if you put any canned food on it. And there's me begging her to eat, which did not work. But it turns out, and I was hoping that there are like other cat parents who have the same issues and so on. But most people said, oh, just change it to a ceramic or, you know, another bowl, which we did, and it works. But that's not the point. I was like, why would she eat canned food, but not raw? And turns out it's because there are tiny fibers of plastic that do contaminate raw food that she can sense, but we can't. And she wouldn't normally sense it if you put canned food, because it's already processed in a way for her to consume it. So yeah, that's my inspiration. Plus I want to show everyone cat photos. And that made me think about microplastics, but not necessarily in the sense of, oh, they're spoiling wildlife or turtles, which is often what you think. But and a lot of people said, oh yeah, that's why I don't eat fish anymore, or that's why I don't eat meat, and so on. But at that point, I think this was about 2 years ago, I was like, how can we have so much plastics in us if, those people are not eating it, etc. And turns out you don't have to have those diets. You can, if you're a breathing organism, you are breathing in microplastics. And most of the research has been done in Denmark, which says, that we will take about, I forget exact, 20 kilos of plastics over a lifetime if we lived for 65 years-ish. So I wanted to look at where are they? Are they right in front of me? So this was part of a cost of innovation residency at Invisible Flock, where we literally just took random objects or random surface and tried to see, can we find microplastics in there? And you can see lots of fibers. I believe that's a reusable water bottle. So it's not like it's designed for you to drink water safely, but there's still lots of fibers. And that was someone's face. And played around with trying to put dyes on them to see if we could see it better or more clearly. And yeah, it was just mind-boggling to think I can do nothing but just exist or breathe and keep taking in 20 kilos of microplastics over my lifetime. Which sorry, too many thoughts in my head. Which you might think, yeah, but where is the art or where is the politics in there? And as someone who has been threatened of getting deported, I had to look at it, which was that most of the microplastic research comes from, as I said, Denmark or Europe, if you will. And there is no data whatsoever about the hundreds of tons of plastics that we throw away to, I don't know, Malaysia, India, where have you. And there is a correlation between people having more respiratory illnesses, which is often a sign of having plastic pollutions in these areas, but there's absolutely zero data on it. So, which led me to my talk as part of WHO panel, which was looking at how the research we're doing on microplastics doesn't give us the whole truth. It doesn't show us what exactly is happening. Because sure, if you live in Denmark, probably it's, you'll only get 20 kilos of plastics in you. But there are people living on the other side of the world that we are intentionally polluting. So, which makes you ask the questions about, is the NHS responsible for treating them? Or is US healthcare responsible for treating those that they send the plastic to? But apparently the answer is a lot more complicated than that, because, oh, sorry, because of bloody scientists. Who- It is, yeah, because when I gave this talk, there were a lot of doctors and climate scientists who said, yeah, but how can you say which percentage of the condition was directly a consequence of plastics pollution? Which I suppose is an interesting question if you're a climate scientist, but I think if you are living with those conditions in those areas, it's almost a moot point. So I asked the questions, I posed this at COP27 of how do we get the UNHCR to acknowledge climate refugees as a category? Which now you might think I do think this category should exist, but I learned a lot since I gave the talk, which has, is this a radical thought? Not anymore, because they have thought about including climate refugees as a category for a fair few years. Most European and US countries do not want it to be, for obvious reasons. I think we can all know that. But this was the most interesting question posed, which was, if this category was created, does this erase any of their colonial experiences? As in, would this, if this category, does this absolve those who are polluting the other side of the world? Because they can simply say, oh, we made a category, we've done our jobs. That's absolutely fine. And but other routes already exist, and the UNHCR has repeatedly said they can just be called economic migrants because they're coming over because they don't have, they're looking for opportunities of clean air, but okay. So yeah, some of them will be economic migrants, but some of them won't be. And yeah, there are too many factors to consider, which is my pain with scientists. And I'm still figuring out how to respond to that properly. And the only way I could think about it was to directly go and ask those living there, which nobody bothers to speak with, and it's incredibly difficult to actually talk to them, is what they would want. Yeah, so the question that was repeatedly asked was, oh, okay, so what can we as doctors or climate scientists do about it? Because we live in a scientific world where unless you tell us this is 100% our fault and you can back that up with real research, it's not something we can do much about. Or what do the people want to live there? They just want to live healthy and safe lives. Duh. And yeah, so when I posed the question about actually creating the category, it's because some may want to go to other countries, but many of them don't. They just want to live their lives where they are. You think it's not that much to ask. And so I started out with speaking with a few quote unquote climate scientists working on different areas. And the next phase of it would be to speak in larger quantities, to speak with those living in the slums, etc., which I can with India, but because I can speak those languages, but I can't with other places. Which, yeah, I think hopefully we can make enough digital artworks about it to change their minds. I think I'm okay for time, almost, yeah. Oh, wow, yeah, that's another one. Yeah, so as Anna mentioned, I'm currently working with Dr. Lucino who works with as part of future studies with visual research. So one of the things we're looking at is if climate refugees concept existed, what is their current perception now? There are a lot of images. You can ask AI to make up an image of climate refugee. It is quite curious the things it picks, because they're often in wonderful places. Like it shows them by like pristine lakes, mountains, etc. So there is kind of like this visual dissonance between what we as a public think they are like, and we're looking at how can we add images to it to change the narrative, or how can we populate it with images that accurately represent and shares their stories. Yeah, and I think I'll stop there. I think I'm almost to the time.
Thank you.
I'll take this.
Yeah, that's a good share. Stop share. I don't know. Then they can see us. So let's have this. Shall I go this way? This way.
I don't know.
People see you. So that was a amazing talk, and lots of really interesting issues there. An interesting thing I think from the Computer Arts Society perspective is that digital is kind of central to your work, the digital realm. And it always has been through the writing practice and everything. Can you talk a bit more about that context and how you use it and all the different ways you use it as well, especially, I mean, in the context of also it's not that easy for you to travel because of the health issue.
That health thing is an excuse. I hate most people. I would live in a tiny room, 3 cats and my laptop if I could.
Don't let that put you off chatting to her.
I'm happy to
She's got a glass of wine in her hand.
Yeah. I've also taken lots of drugs to be here too, so it helps. All prescriptions. I do think it's like the internet and tech that allows me to, reach out to a lot of other people like me, who are people who are worse than me, who might not be able to come out even for like one evening here, for instance. And I don't think I would have ever started making quote unquote art if I couldn't do it that way. Because I don't see myself working in a studio doing hard work or working, with people on a daily 9 to 5 sort of thing.
Yeah. Cool. I was going to say was maybe because we talked about the health conditions and chronic invisible illnesses. I wonder if it'd be interesting for you to list your chronic invisible illnesses, because you can't, obviously you could see this hole there maybe, but there's quite a few, isn't there? And I think that makes it kind of explicit that you have a lot of, like, if you want to sit on the tube, you have to have that badge, don't you, that you can show to people, I need this seat, and people argue with you quite often, don't they, because it's an invisible condition. So you have this whole thing about this writing project you did called Chronically Living, where you collected people's stories and things like that as well. Could you speak a bit more about
Oh, yeah. I started it when my doctors told me to stop working and that they would help me get benefits. But then I told them I'm not a British citizen. And then they said, oh, we're sorry. Kept quiet. But so I figured, I mean, come on, there have to be other people like me. So the storytelling project was me sharing my lived experience, which I think I did about, not much, about 2 of them or so. And I realized there were other people in different parts of the world who had different social, political, cultural, whatever hurdles that were not allowing them to live the way that they wanted to. So I came up with kind of like a formulaic thing where people would fill in their responses to it. It was like a set of 5 questions, and that would form, kind of generate a story that tells them all the things they are doing because of their conditions rather than despite of it, which somehow acted like almost every single person who wrote to me was like, oh, I wish I could submit a story, but I don't do anything amazing, or I don't have any special skills, or I only have negative things to share about it. But when you ask them to, put it in paper or in a computer, I think it worked as almost like not just a therapeutic tool, but almost like the story cared for them in return by showing them all the things that they are capable of, when most of the world tells them that they're all the things they're not capable of.
Have we got any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. She is terrifying. There's one at the back there.
Yeah, I don't think she answered your question, but I was interested too. What are your chronic?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I have asthma, and by that I have one functioning lung. I have Crohn's disease, ankylosing spondylitis, and what else do I?
That's what we know of.
Oh, yeah. EDS, although I did get a text just yesterday, was it yesterday I texted you, saying I could have new conditions. So it's very promising.
And you had dengue fever twice and hemorrhagic dengue fever.
Yeah, that's
which is why she's only got half a. And you've actually you spent 6 months in a coma, haven't you? Over 2 different occasions.
Yeah.
So 3 months and 3 months for different reasons. So you can Google Bhavani and you'll find out the stories of when they did try to deport her when she was in a coma. And you've got a letter threatening to deport her. She was in the hospital. Because you lived here more than
16 years.
16
now?
years now. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. But this was under this hostile environment policy of the previous government. So,
Well, it still exists.
yeah.
I still get threatened every few months, asking me to come in and answer questions as to why I deserve to get care. But except now I don't respond to it. But I did sue for freedom of information to tell them they already have my information and they shouldn't be threatening people for no reason. And then they suddenly stopped.
It's good to know how to do these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a bit pathetic and it's a pity how things are. And it's a pity the way the system and the government is. most of the time, I see it as a lip service. I think it's better not to pronounce what they are saying and doing another thing. I'm a living witness, but we talked, what he said last. They pretend they are helping people or generality. Okay, they will tell you conflict awareness. They will tell you stress, depression, but they create it like the letter of a thing. They pretend that everything is free. Yes, it is, but it comes with the consequences, more especially if you are, if you have one kind of unknown sickness. I can talk on and on. But 2-3 examples are the bills and when they send letters to you. Or when you call them, they will say they have GDPR, they are recording, they are this, but everything they do, they will tell you that they are doing their job, but everything they ask, the way they ask it, is annoying. You understand?
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to do it. And even though some people, and that's why you see some people taking advantage of it. You understand? But unfortunately, and very unfortunately, it affects the people that need it most. And it seems the so-called politicians, decision makers, and the people behind the scene are getting it wrong. And that's why people are in that. Like now, some people have health conditions, but you want them to be working stressfully. And the people that employ them are aware of it, whether they now tell the managers or not. And sometimes again, even the managers are aware of it, but they use it against you.
You've had sort of experiences
So,
like that, haven't you? Well,
So I
with
can, my own health condition is not that to our own level. Say more. But when you now react, they tell you you're aggressive, you're this, you're that. And they use it either to threaten you, to demoralize you, to demotivate you, and to devalue you, which is very unfortunate. But thank you for speaking up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we live in a ableist society, so it's not, I don't think anything is designed for anyone who doesn't match, this archetype of perfectly able human body, which simply doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But we still create systems that actually only make life easier for this archetype of a person who isn't any of us.
Mhm.
When you actually look into what makes.
Yeah, it's a kind of, you can see that even sometimes, there is not sometimes, actually, what they are doing is that you can see that they are squeezing the working class. Let us agree that, okay, we are healthy now. But at the same time, they are squeezing the working class to be demotivated. You will see that you have to be sleep, go to work, come back. You can't do some things you ought to do if you don't have the sufficient money.
think we've got another question there. Thank you for that.
So, I guess tangential to this, I mean, for you kind of going and doing this work at COP27 and sort of bringing your artistic career into these really the beating heart of international politics or aspects of it, do you find primarily that this is empowering, or do you find that actually the more you expose yourself to it, the more you feel kind of hyper aware of it and find yourself sort of fixating on it, or is it a combination of both?
I've never found it empowering. I think for me, I use these spaces to understand how best to get through to these systems. Because like, you know, people saying, oh, we can't do anything about us polluting the other side of the world because there are too many factors involved. So that's something that would have never occurred to me if I hadn't put myself out there and had these conversations. Because to me, it's a very straightforward thing. This is happening, there's rise of respiratory issues, and we can see there's more plastic. The only thing you need to confirm is, you know, maybe see how much plastics is in compared to the Danes to them. So, but I think I wouldn't do it if the experience stopped, if it didn't allow me to look at things in new ways, because otherwise we'll just be speaking two different languages. And, you know, I can be shouting here and they'll be shouting there and nothing will get done. So for me, the only use of these spaces is to understand what would motivate them to actually give attention to these issues and how best can I speak to them in their own language to respond to it.
I mean, part of the beauty of art as well is that it gives people another way into your story as well. They can visually see it, they can experience these elements of it, and they see it in an exhibition, and then that gives you a kind of voice, and it gives people a new way into that dialogue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about your work as a vehicle to talk about these issues, I mean, that's what activism in art is, really, isn't it? And that's why we're discussing this idea of being radical and having it, like going into these spaces where artists aren't really supposed to be. It's for politicians and stuff like that. And that's what makes it really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, but would you call that art though? As in, I guess that's where my contention is, where I don't see myself as quote unquote a real artist.
There's a term called artivist.
Oh, yeah.
You could be one of those. Yeah.
Um,
We've got a couple of questions over here. Let's have Jeff first.
yeah, I've been monitoring the chat, and you've had lots of compliments via the chat, so that's good for a really interesting talk, which I agree with. You said you had a literary background before you went into like visual art, and what made you move from like maybe a narrative system into a visual system, and how do you feel about that going forward?
I'm not sure I've entirely moved yet, because I think at the heart of everything I do is text-based work, and the visuals come out of it. And I came to the UK to do my master's, which was in cultural studies, so not necessarily art, but it was within the School of Fine Art. And in India, where I did my undergrad, we do multiple disciplines at once. So it was a combination of media studies, literary theory, and clinical psychology thrown in there.
Were you writing actual stories, or was it poetry, or what kind of text were you dealing with?
I think I'm interested in trying to find patterns in narratives and how I can put a certain skeleton or like framework that everyone can make something their own from it. And I would want that to show people different aspects of themselves that they may not be able to because the world doesn't allow them to.
So the people that write into you with invisible disabilities or whatever they're writing about, you can weave that into your own work? Okay.
You used to write for Huffington Post, didn't you, and things like that, like news articles. Yeah. So, any question here?
Yeah, I was going to say it's really inspiring how you show lots of examples of how technology is related to your healthcare journey, particularly. And obviously, there's so many new technologies coming into healthcare at the moment. Well, lots of negatives for that, but also some positives as well. Particular digital technologies at the moment, which you're interested in, and anything you're excited about for your next work, particularly your Surrey residency.
It might sound very statistics, but I would love to put everyone in an AI environment where they can experience what it's like to be in my body. Because there's no, I cannot say enough about what it's like for someone with lupus, which I don't have, but I share symptoms with those who have it or etc. So I think I would love to do that, but I did do like a sound piece a while ago that tried to emulate pain frequencies, but that was deemed on similar levels as torture. I just need to figure out a way to.
That doesn't mean it's not good.
I think it's great. I think it's amazing, but I mean, I don't see what's the big difference between people, throwing ice bucket on them versus voluntarily entering into an artwork to experience this. But God forbid.
I mean, to bring in Camille here because she's actually made some amazing artworks. So the most recent one, Memory Mountain, which she showed at the British Science Festival in the year before last, and well, last year actually. And you're in VR and you experience breast cancer.
Well,
or I'm not
Treatments,
probably-
yeah, you're going through a treatment, and there's the garment with vibrations in different parts of where the lymph nodes would be. So it's trying to take you that through emotionally and somewhat physically through the experience of treatment.
Oh,
So yeah, I think you should do what you're thinking of.
We should have a chat after.
Oh, yeah,
over wine.
definitely.
Definitely. Is there any more questions? Well, in that case, I think we should go and have the wine that we've spoken about. I think it was an amazing talk. And for someone that it's very impressive.
I said that it was that bad, so only for someone who didn't go to school it was
No, absolute genius. And yeah, thank you so much, Bhavani. Let's go back.